Now, the general election delivered the most diverse House of Commons ever, with a rise in the number of women, LGBT and ethnic minority MPs elected. Well, joining us to discuss this in Westminster, we have the Telegraph writer Radhika Sangani.
Wait a second. I recognize her. Isn't she... Yes, she is. This was the reporter who told us all a couple of years ago that air conditioning is sexist. Oh man, I can't wait to hear what she has to say today.
And the journalist Izzy Lyons. Good morning to you both. Radhika, I'll come to you first. The most diverse Commons ever. This is good news, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's great news.
But...
We've got, for the first time, we've got our first MP, black MP for the Midlands, who is Eleanor Smith. We've got our first female Sikh MP.
But...
We've hit a lot of firsts. We've got more people with disabilities and more people with state-educated backgrounds in Parliament, and it's all fantastic news.
But
at the same time, it does seem slightly mad that in 2017 we're still hitting some of our firsts. And I think, as much as we should be excited by this news, we shouldn't kind of rest on our laurels and not remember that there's still progress to be made.
Of course. It's not good enough. It's the current year. The fact that all of these different people are now in positions of power is good, but yeah, it's just not good enough.
We've got more female MPs now, but that's still 32%. And that doesn't exactly fully represent the fact that more than half of women in our society are female.
What? More than half of women in our society are female. Really? Well, how much of women in our society are not female? Jesus.
Okay, that's the view of Radhika. Going to Izzy Lyons. Izzy, are you celebrating this diversity, or are you with Radhika that more actually needs to be done? We're nowhere near there yet in terms of getting equal representation.
Funny that you use the word representation in this context, as the people in positions of power are there on the basis of democratic elections. Whatever a person's biological or sexual category, if they're elected to their position, they represent their constituents, and hopefully not a specific demographic.
Well, firstly, it goes without saying that, of course, our parliament should reflect the kind of country and our society that we live in. That is, ultimately the purpose of democracy. And we live in a very, very diverse country made up of multiple ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. It's a society where you're free to, love who you wish and pursue whatever career you desire.
Well, unless you're white and want to work at the BBC, that is.
But what this obsession with our MPs' race or their gender or their sexual orientation is completely and utterly unnecessary, because it absolutely does not reflect their capabilities to be a good public servant. It's their ideas that do that. And when we get caught up in these very shallow and face value factors like the colour of someone's skin or what school they went to, or whether they're a man or whether they're a woman, we actually lose the wider picture and the wider debate and the conversations that we should really be having to ensure progress.
What? Are you saying that someone should be assessed on the content of their character and not the color of their skin or what's between their legs? Anyway, sarcasm aside, this is the kind of perspective you want in a free and fair society. I wonder how our other reporter will respond.
And there's this suggestion somehow that if you have more black MPs and more female MPs, then you're apparently going to be better represented in politics. And I just fundamentally disagree with that, because some of the MPs I most ferociously disagree with are women. Theresa May, just to name but one, as well with black MPs. David Lammy, he's an anti-democrat who completely undermines Brexit whenever he opens his mouth. And I don't disagree with those MPs because they're women or because they're black. It's their politics that we disagree with. So we really need to steer away from judging these people on their gender or the colour of their skin and bring it back to policy and bring it back to ideas, because those are fundamentally going to be the things that change this country for the better.
Excellent. And now, the counterpoint.
There you go, Radhika. It doesn't matter what you look like, it's about your politics.
I mean, I completely disagree.
You completely disagree? Ah, so what you are and what you look like are the most important things. Go on.
You know, I think ultimately visibility matters. If you're a young person growing up in this country, I've spoken to so many young people as a journalist, and so many of them are from different ethnic minorities, so many are women, and so many are becoming disengaged with politics because they just feel like they're not represented.
If you vote people into office, they are representing you. That's how democracy works. Now, if you think that political representation should be based wholly on optics, then, by all means, tell us what laws that you would put into place to ensure that you get the visible results that you desire. And then, tell us how such laws would be democratic.
And it's huge. I don't understand how anybody could possibly say it's not important to have a diverse parliament, because our parliament is meant to reflect our population. And, you know, as much as it's wonderful for male MPs to discuss gender equality and for white MPs to talk about race issues, ultimately we also do need to hear from the people who are affected by them.
Men are not involved in gender equality. White people are not affected by racism. Got it.
You know, the only way that we can actually change as a society is if we get this full spectrum of views.
Full spectrum of views? You weren't talking about views. Your counterpart was talking about views, and you completely disagreed. You were talking about aesthetics.
And, I mean, on a personal note, you know, growing up as a young Indian woman, I think it's just so great to actually be able to see people like me represented in Parliament.
People like you. So, all Indian women are like you. They think the same and act the same. So, if there was an Indian woman running for office who represented ideas you completely disagreed with, that would be weighted less in your voting decision than the color of her skin and her nation of origin. Got it.
And I just know how important it is for my peers to see the same.
Yeah, Izzy, Radhika makes a very good point there. I mean, for instance, women are going to be more encouraged to go into politics or into any job if they see other women there. It paves a path. Yes, your politics are at the front and centre of what you should be doing in government, but, you know, you have to see people like you there to be able to feel like you can get there yourself.
Uh-huh. And Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. And Theresa May is Prime Minister. Well, for the moment anyway. And there are women in Parliament. And 3 women are having their views broadcast on Sky News to the entire planet. So, what's the problem again?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I agree with your point, and I said it in my opening statement, Radhika, that of course we need a parliament that reflects our country, and I trust the British electorate to do that. You know, we saw that in Battersea in the most recent election, a very prosperous, wealthy area that many people were very surprised went to Labour from the Conservatives. But the residents of Battersea didn't vote Marsha, a black Labour candidate, in because she's black. They voted her in because they prefer her policies and they prefer the manifesto of the party that she's standing for. And I also do take serious issue with the argument that you can, only lobby for gay rights if you're gay, or you can only, sort of campaign to end domestic violence or campaign for women's issues if you're a woman. Because throughout history, we've seen the complete opposite. The best example, Jeremy Corbyn. He was a huge anti-apartheid campaigner in the 80s, and he's a white man. So the suggestion that we should be drawing up special interest groups for special groups in society, particularly when we're talking about electing a government, not only sort of goes against the purpose of electing a government through the process of democracy, but it goes against everything that we've seen in our society in the past few decades.
Nailed it.
Radhika, does it go against democracy, or is it actually common sense? Because, a diverse government means that, there's more equality, means that things will work better. I mean, for instance, you see in big corporations all this talk about having a quota, for instance, on women in the boardroom. I mean, can that kind of thing work in politics?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. A quota system for politics, based on gender and or other arbitrary factors. Okay, well, tell me again how that idea coincides with democracy.
I know there's always going to be negative arguments to quotas, with positive discrimination, and we're all aware of those.
Positive discrimination. Positive for whom? Is that like the nonsense that is reverse racism?
But I think at the same time, when there's so much progress to be made, sometimes it just needs to be done. And what Izzy said is right. Of course, people aren't voting in MPs because they're black, because they're female. They're voting them in because of their policies and because of what they're saying.
Right. So, what's wrong with that? If that MP had been white with the exact same ideas and policy opinions, would that have been a bad thing?
And we've had, amazing progress. Like, we've seen so many ethnic minority MPs now being voted in really non-urban areas, which is quite new and quite rare. And that's great. But at the same time, these MPs can only be voted for if they are candidates. And, we've seen Labour doing all-female shortlists in the past, and that's been amazing. We've seen huge progress. Labour has about 119 female MPs now compared to the Conservative Party with 67. So I do think that targets and quotas can work.
Can work. Well, yes, if your goal is to insert people into positions of power on the basis of anything other than personal merit or democratic process, then yes, quotas can work.
And ultimately, to me, it's just, it's setting the wrongs of the past right. It's a way to make things fair again.
Fair. You do not care about fair. You're advocating for the opposite of fair. You're saying candidates for office need to first be put through filters based on attributes that are not determinative at all of their ideas or policy positions. You're proposing implementing restrictions on who can or cannot qualify to hold office based on things they have no control over: their race, their gender, their sexuality. Your position is the furthest thing from fair. As always, thank you for watching.